Bore da, everybody. Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Louise Roberts and I'm a social worker. I am a social worker. I'm a lecturer in social work based at Cardiff University. I'm also part of Cascade, which is the Children's Social Care Research and Development Centre. I'm presenting today with Rachael Vaughan. Rach, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Good morning. My name is Rachael and I'm the engagement manager for children and young people at Cascade, and I've been working with Louise on this part of this project for the last year. I can just see we've got some participants coming, so I think the numbers have stopped going up now, so I think we're probably okay to get started.
Okay, so just a couple of announcements before we start. So this webinar is part of ExChange Wales Transitions Conference Series. It is also part of the ESRC Festival of Social Science. We are recording the webinar, as you've probably been notified already. It will feature on the Cascade YouTube channel and will possibly feature as well on the Festival of Social Science website. So just to make you aware of that. We have got quite a bit to cover within the hour, but if you do have any questions, we're hoping that we'll have some time at the end for questions. If you do want to make any comments or ask any questions, please put them in the chat box and we will get to them after. Equally, if we are short on time, please feel free to contact Rachael or myself because we're really interested in any feedback that you have. Okay, so for today then, the title of our presentation is Supporting Young People in and Leaving Care Who Are Parents. I'm going to talk through some of the research findings, and then we're going to focus on our more recent work, which has been developing a charter for change. Oh, next slide, please, Rach. Okay, so you can see on this slide a picture of my book. It was published in March this year. As I said, we are quite short on time today. So if you would like to know any more about the research in any more detail, then please, I would encourage you to have a look at the book. What we have developed in terms of the Good Practice Charter is based on a 5-year research study. The book brings together previous publications. There was a range of publications, journal papers and book chapters published over the course of the 5 years. The book brings those together as well as adding in some new data. And the aim was to try and provide a holistic consideration of early pregnancy and parenthood for this group of young people. Any presentation that I do, I always say that the idea for the research came from young people connected to Voices from Care Cymru. I talk about the origins of the research in the introductory chapter and why this issue is and was important to young people. The bulk of the book is split into 3 thematic sections. So it covers outcomes, it covers experiences and perspectives, both of professionals as well as parents, and then it looks at issues of support. The final chapter, the book ends with a letter from a parent. And if you look at nothing else, I would really encourage you to scroll to the end of the book and read Jen's letter. Jen has worked and supported the research and our ongoing work for its duration. She is amazing. You'll hear some audio clips from her a bit later on. And she writes this letter at the end of the book, which sort of summarizes her experience, really powerfully highlights some of the key issues from the research. And she makes a plea that the research isn't the end point, that her experiences and the experiences of other people lead to some positive change. So as I said, I would really encourage you to read Jen's letter, if nothing else. When I'm encouraging you to look at the book, I'm not asking you to spend any money. It is free to download. I wanted to make the book available to as wide a range of people as possible. And a bit later on, when we show you our resources page, and I think it may have just come up in the chat, we'll show you the link to where you can download it. Next slide, please, Rach. Okay, so we've structured this presentation in a similar way to the way that the book is structured. We're going to pull out some key findings, and these are, you know, really key findings. We don't have the opportunity to go into detail, but what we're going to do is sort of pull out some key findings in respect of outcomes and hopefully make a case as to why this is an important area of policy and practice. When I'm talking about outcomes, I'm specifically talking about, you know, separation or the living arrangements of parents and children. So do children stay with their parents? There is other work, you know, that focuses on different types of outcomes for parents, but I'm specifically interested in the living arrangements, the legal status of children. After we touch on outcomes, I don't think I'm going to be giving away a big spoiler if I say the data that we found in terms of outcomes was concerning. And so the next part of the presentation will look about how we can make sense of those outcomes by drawing on professional and parent reflections. And then for the final part, then we'll explore opportunities for policy and practice change. And the hashtag messages to corporate parents is the title of our recent ESRC impact study. Okay, next slide, please, Rach. Okay, so in terms of outcomes, what I did, you know, at the start of the study, it's important to say that we had very little information in terms of the numbers of parents in and leaving care in Wales, and we certainly had no information in terms of outcomes for parents. So in order to make a contribution to that evidence base, I did two things. The first part was working with researchers working on another study within Cardiff University called the Wales Adoption Study. This study was led by Professor Catherine Shelton at the School of Psychology, and that study captured every child in Wales that was adopted over a 13-month period. And they had, as part of their data, they had 374 child adoption record forms. And what we asked the researchers if we could do was have a look at that data again and see how many birth parents were recorded as care leavers. And what we found was that 27% of birth mothers and 19% of birth fathers were recorded as care leavers. So 1 in 4 birth mothers, 1 in 5 birth fathers. And I'll come back to that shortly. In addition then, I wanted to provide a snapshot of current parents in Wales. And this phase of the study involved engaging with 20 out of the 22 local authorities in Wales. I went to the leaving care teams and said, okay, of the young people that are open to your service presently, how many are expecting a child or are parenting? We identified 258 parents aged between 16 and 21, 238 children and 44 ongoing pregnancies. For each of those parents, I asked a series of additional questions, including where children were living. We found 74% of children were living with at least one biological parent, but 26% of children were separated from both biological parents. So 1 in 4 children were separated from both birth parents. Now, instinctively, on both parts of those outcomes findings, you know, instinctively you can look at those figures and think, oh, you know, they seem high. But it's hard to have a statistic to compare those two. And what I always consider is that each year, around 1% of children in Wales are recorded as being in care. So it then becomes quite concerning when we think that care leavers go on to make up such sizable numbers of parents who are subject to the highest level of state intervention in family life. Similarly, when we know that 1% of children are in care each year in Wales, but then we see that 26% of children born to care experienced parents are separated. Again, it helps to show the disparity in those figures. I do want to stress that this isn't an issue that is unique to Wales. The references that I've included at the bottom of this slide are all reviews of the evidence. And we now have successive reviews that span the evidence from 1989 all the way through to 2020. and issues related to outcomes, issues related to high prevalence of early pregnancy and parenthood, challenges and disadvantage in respect of parenting are shared across the international literature. Okay, and they originate from a range of countries, including the US, Spain, Australia, Canada. So, you know, it's not just an issue unique to Wales. Next slide, please, Rich. Okay, so for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to draw on some parent and professional perspectives to try and help make sense of those concerning outcomes. And the first thing I'm going to do is look at the potential for professionals to question the influence of past experiences on parenting capacity, the potential for systemic disadvantage. I'm going to highlight the problematic relationships that young people can have with social workers, and then finally consider disadvantaged access to support. Next slide, please. So the first thing that came out of the data was the potential for young people's parenting capacity to be questioned based on their previous experiences. And that could be pre-care experiences as well as their experiences in care. So the idea is you didn't experience good parenting, therefore you don't know what it is to be a good parent. And this is an example from a quote here from a team manager who said, I mean, their experience is going to obviously impact on their ability to parent. Most relationships and experiences of parenthood is skewed or is dysfunctional, so it's not going to have a good impact. It's important to say that the data that was generated with young people stood in sharp contrast to this. You know, the potential for stigmatized views of young people's ability to be parents was really strongly criticized by young people themselves, who often talked about, you know, being really motivated and committed to ensuring better experiences. They wanted to be better parents, they wanted to be good parents to their children and ensure better experiences, childhood experiences for them than they themselves had experienced. Nevertheless, as I said, there is this potential for professionals to question a young person's parenting capacity, you know, at the outset based on their past experiences. In addition, the research highlighted some systemic disadvantage. Professionals often talked about young people being been more likely to experience assessment and scrutiny in terms of their parenting. So I've put an example here of a sort of a tendency or a practice of referring young people when they say that they're pregnant for automatic pre-birth assessment. And this is from the leaving care teams, I should say. So we had a small minority of leaving care teams that I worked with that said, yeah, we do automatically refer every young person for a parenting assessment. They tended to frame that positively because what they'd say was, we know that our young people are likely to have support needs, and we want those support needs to be identified and responded to at the earliest opportunity. However, the majority of local authorities said, well, you know, you won't find it written down anyway, but there is an expectation that young people will be referred on to children's services as unborn, and talk about there being an unspoken policy that every child or young person needs to be referred. In addition, leaving care professionals also said that even if, you know, we believe that that is wrong, that that is discriminatory, and even if we commit to not doing it, the chances are that a referral will be made from other professionals, and they highlighted in particular midwives and health visitors, so that they thought it was very likely that young people would be referred from health colleagues. Next slide, please, Rich. The other area of disadvantage that was highlighted was the use and influence of historical records. So if a young person has been in care, there is often a wealth of historical information that is held on them. So this personal advisor said the sheer fact that we've got so much information on these young people, when you look at some of the chronologies and, you know, the way things are sometimes written, and I think everyone goes, oh, this is really scary. It's a shame, because everything they've ever done, you know, we will know about. There are some that we don't think there's any risks, and by we, they're referring to leaving care workers, personal advisors. No concerns, you know, yes, okay, they've behaved stupidly in the past, but how they're presenting now, you know, and I think somewhere there has to be a cutoff, doesn't there, of when are we going to stop looking at the behaviours of this person when they were 14 and now they're 19. So there was a concern about, you know, as this personal advisor highlighted, about the continued relevance of the historical information. Young people also, you know, often questioned the information that was written about them, and talked about the fact that it, you know, tends to highlight negatives as opposed to positives or the mundane. But there was a concern that this historical information would nevertheless, you know, wield powerful influence over assessments of parenting, or the potential for young people to be parents. In addition, the research highlighted, you know, the dual responsibilities, I called it, of professionals. So whereas for many young people or parents, you know, if they are struggling in terms of finances, or they need emotional support or practical support, they can go to their parent, and usually, you know, you would expect that support to be, those support needs to be met, or at least you wouldn't expect there to be any major consequences from going and asking for that support. For young care experienced young people, that can be, you know, quite different. So the team manager here says we do have occasions where people run out of food or run out of electricity, and, you know, that is problematic, because not only are they not meeting their own and their child's needs, but they know that by coming to us and asking for help in that situation would trigger us to think, are there other things to be looking into? So, you know, leaving care workers are a key source of support for young people, often their first point of contact. Yet by going to their parent, you know, they're sort of the face of corporate parenting often, and asking for support, young people can inadvertently be raising concerns about their ability to be a parent. Next slide, please. I also wanted to point to the relationships that young people, or the perceptions that young people can have of social workers. What sort of characterized the reflections of young people was often a perception of social workers as adding to their difficulties, certainly not being seen as people who could support them in terms of parenting. So I put an example here of Bethany, and she said, I have had like worries over social services, obviously. I'm like thinking of them taking the baby off me, but I have been told that it's not going to happen unless you do something wrong, but then you don't know social services, you know what they're like. So Bethany, you know, had a relatively positive relationship with her social worker, but the fear and the mistrust of social workers sort of clouded her whole pregnancy, and that was, you know, that was often an experience that was shared by other young people. When I met up with Bethany around about a year later, she was talking to me about giving birth. She gave birth on her own. She had a difficult birth, and she ended up having a cesarean section. And she said, I was awake, but my head was going 10 to a dozen, because like I didn't know what was happening. They took her off me, and I thought, oh, what if social are here and they're going to take her off me? That's how I felt. That's how I thought. And I always found that quote, you know, really powerful, because this is a, you know, a huge moment in Bethany's life. It's the birth of her first child, and, you know, even the professionals with her at that time, the medical professionals with her at that time, taking the baby and checking that she was okay, that was interpreted as potentially, you know, they were going to remove the baby, or that there were social workers lurking sort of behind the door. And that, you know, that sense of fear and mistrust, as I said, had the potential to cloud young people's experiences, and they certainly weren't looking at social workers as people who could help and support them in their parenting. Next slide, please. And then finally, I wanted to point to the data that we had in terms of support. Professionals in particular highlighted the importance of having emotional support, having somebody by the young person's side. That could be a range of different people. You know, it could be a partner, it could be members of the birth family, it could be the partner's family, previous carers. But it was seen that, you know, it really important that young people had somebody that they could call on, had somebody to rely on that was an informal source of support. For the ones who didn't have that, the chances of success in terms of parenting was seen as much more difficult, because formal support options were often limited. So, you know, only available in office hours, or, you know, if you were going to professionals who have lots of young people that they're trying to support on their caseload, the ability to get that sort of support that you need, and you know, as I just mentioned, those dual responsibilities and the potential to make the situation worse rather than better. It was seen overall that the availability of support through corporate payments was a really poor substitute to what you'd ordinarily expect to be available via birth families. And this team manager said, yeah, I think corporate parents need to have a better understanding and recognition in terms of what they would do for their own children when they're a parent, the support that they would provide. I guess it's those little things that a lot of people take for granted that care leavers don't have the opportunity to have, really, which makes it twice as hard for them. Next slide, please. So I've rattled through some of those key findings. So I'm going to take a breath now, and I'm going to share with you a short film that we've had made, which sort of summarizes some of these key issues from the perspective of care experienced parents.
When young people in and leaving care become parents. This film summarises findings of a 5-year research study undertaken at Cascade, Cardiff University. Parents talked about their difficult childhoods and wanted better experiences for their children.
I never wanted my kids to grow up like I grew up. My kids are going to want to come home. My kids are going to know that I'm here for them. My kids are going to know right from wrong and that I love them.
Despite wanting to be good parents, young people were often worried about social workers being involved. These worries were often present throughout the pregnancy and after giving birth.
The first thing that came into my mind was social services. I have had worries over social services, obviously, and thinking of them taking the baby off me.
Many parents were referred for an assessment. Some developed positive relationships with social workers and felt supported, but others felt judged and stigmatised because of their care experience.
With my son, the social workers knew everything about my time in care, but they kind of used it against me, because they see it as, well, if your birth parents did this with you, you're most likely to do it as well, and that wasn't the case.
Parents often needed help caring for a child. Many also needed help with housing, finances, relationships, ongoing health issues, and education or work. While some parents had partners, family members, friends, or carers to help them, others were on their own and reliant on their corporate parents. However, professional support was often limited and only available in office hours. This left parents feeling isolated, exhausted, and overwhelmed.
I'd never been on my own with a baby before. I was quite frightened. I didn't have any family to turn to, and she wasn't sleeping very well, and I just needed a break.
For some parents, the challenges were too much and they became separated from their children.
It feels horrible because I know there's things I could have done differently, but I was a child myself. I needed help and support, and I wasn't getting it. The day they took the baby off me, I collapsed on the floor. I cried and I cried and I cried. It's made me have mental health problems. It's affected the rest of my life.
For those who were able to continue caring for children despite adversity, being a parent had the potential to be rewarding and fulfilling.
I look at my kids as being my life fixers, really, because they've done such a big thing for me. I don't see myself as being that person anymore. I feel like a new person now.
We want all young people in and leaving care to feel happy and supported as parents. For further details of the research study and ongoing work, please visit our website.
Okay, so I mean, I think that film really succinctly highlights some of the key issues that came up in the research from parents. So I'm now, hopefully, you know, you'll agree with me that it is a powerful film, and that is sort of, when we came to the end of the research, we really didn't want that to be the end point. So I'm going to hand over to Rachael now, who's going to talk about our ongoing work in this area.
Thanks, Louise. Yeah, so exactly like Louise said, once she'd finished the research and put everything together then in the book as well, she just didn't want to leave it there and was looking at what else we could do, what were the next steps, and what could we draw together to support best practice in this area. And this is what this project has looked at. We started in January, and the idea was to put together some sort of charter. We didn't really know what that would look like at the time, around supporting parents in and leaving care, and that would be a message to corporate parents. So I'm just going to explain a bit about what we did. So this was the plan for the project, was to work co-productively with care experienced parents, policymakers, professionals and academics to put together this good practice charter, and then draw it all together and create some impact materials, one of which is that video that we just watched. And then really looking to get commitments for this good practice charter and raise awareness about this issue. So in terms of the consultation and co-producing the charter, we worked with some partners in Wales, so Voices from Care Cymru, NIAS Cymru and TGP Cymru, and they were kind of our core partners from the beginning of the project. So we worked to develop the project initially with care experienced parents from Voices from Care Cymru, and then NIAS, as part of their Project Unity, also supported with some consultations with their parents, and then working with third sector partners and the policy board at Voices from Care Cymru, we widened the feedback and consultation we were getting on the charter, and then started kind of to tweak it and work on it more from there. We've also spoken to social care practitioners, so both in England and in Wales, as well as other kind of leaders across social services in Wales and wider. So what also happened during the start of putting this together is that we got in touch with the Care Leave a Local Offer website, and Terry Galloway, who's been running that, and he provided great support and feedback and has been involved with some of this, which I'll share in a little bit. I just wanted to talk briefly about our work with care experienced parents and the sorts of things that we did with them and how we really started to pull this best practice charter together. So we attended kind of a lot of regular sessions with Voices from Care Cymru, and then, like I said, the NIAS Project Unity, some of their parents also had an opportunity to feed in a bit later on in the process. So to begin with, we just started talking about what was important, what did we need to be thinking about, what was important to the parents when they were pregnant and when they were parenting, and what had they wished had been there or what really helped them. And then we moved on to look at Louise's research. We drew on some of the recommendations and then really started to draft and put something together. And then from there, we went through a lot of different versions, trying to work out what was the best approach to take, what language we should use, how to broaden it out, but be specific enough. So the group were amazing and they did a lot of work with us. And this was all kind of the initial setup before we even started sharing it with anybody else. So just wanted to say a massive thank you to those parents, a few of whom we'll hear from in a little bit. So now I'm hoping that I can share all of the resources that we have. So I'm going to stop my screen share and then share the website. Hopefully this will work. There we go. So let me go to the top. So this is on our ExChange Wales page. So this is under resources, and it's supporting parents in and leaving care. So this is a bilingual website, so all of our resources are also available in Welsh. So this shares a little bit of information about the project, and then we go straight into the research. So this is the video that we've just watched, and there's also a link here to Louise's book that, like she said, is free to download and really brings together all of the research she's done over 5 years. And then we move on to the charter that we've been working on, and we've got lots of different ways to share this. So firstly, we've got a video, which I'll share in a moment. And then we've got a few different versions. So we've got a PDF version, we've got an illustrated leaflet to make things more accessible, and it just looks a bit nicer, and perhaps to read through with parents themselves or to share with parents. And then we've got a one-page poster version that really kind of condenses some of the asks onto one page. And then next, we're hoping to have people sign up to our charter, and we've been very fortunate that as part of the Care Leavers local offer, Terry Galloway has already got our first sign up. So Harrow Council have agreed to use this best practice charter. So thank you very much to Terry for that, and hopefully we'll have more as we go on. We've also created a podcast. So on the podcast, Louise and I speak with our partner organisations, so Voices from Care Cymru, NIAS Cymru and TGP Cymru, as well as a couple of care experienced parents that have been involved from the beginning, and one of which Louise has already mentioned, Jan, has been involved for a really long time, and has been such a huge part of all of this work. Once this webinar recording is sorted, we'll also have that up on the page for anyone that wasn't able to make it today to be able to hear about the work that we've been doing. And then just finally, we're hoping to share best practice examples. So at the moment, we've got NIAS Project Unity posters here if anyone would like some more information. But if there's anything going on in your local authority, if you know of any best practice work in this area that you'd like to share with us, we'd really like to highlight and champion some of that work here. So please do get in touch. And then finally, we've just got Louise's publications from all of her work. I'm going to go back to the presentation now, hopefully. This should work. There we go. And we're going to look at the charter. So like I said, there's lots of different versions, but this is the video version that kind of summarizes it. So here it is.
As corporate parents, we are committed to supporting mothers and fathers who are in care or in the process of leaving care. This charter sets out what we will do to help you plan for being a parent, how we will support when you become a parent, and what we will do to challenge stigma and discrimination. We'll be there for you before you start a family to discuss healthy relationships and help you prepare for being a parent. During pregnancy, the health and well-being of expectant mothers and babies is our priority. We are also committed to supporting the well-being and inclusion of fathers. Everyone is different. Some parents will need little support, while others will need more help. We'll make sure you have the things you need. You know your rights and entitlements, who is available to support you, and what services are available. Parents in and leaving care can experience stigma and discrimination. This is unacceptable. We will make clear that referrals to children's services should not be based on care status. If concerns are raised about parenting, we will work with you and be honest with you. We will make sure you have access to advocacy and legal advice. We will support you to respond to concerns. Make sure you are treated fairly, with your rights respected. If your child has been removed, we will not abandon you, and we will never give up on you. We will help you deal with the practical, financial, and emotional implications. The Charter was developed with care experienced parents and is designed to make sure parents in and leaving care are well supported and treated fairly. For more details of our commitments, please visit our resources page on the ExChange Wales website.
So that gives an overview of the Charter, but please do have a look. I mean, that's the easiest way to share it in a forum like this. And before we had the video ready, Louise and I did read through it during some presentations, and it's quite long and it's not the easiest way to present it that way. So, but we'd really encourage you to have a look yourselves and share the resources and have a look at the full ask. That's all available to download off the page, off the website that I shared. So just finally then, we really wanted to give the final word in this presentation to the parents that we've been working with on this charter. And when we were pulling together this presentation and talking about starting to raise awareness about our resources and sharing these with people and going to different meetings, we thought it was really important to talk to the parents first about what was most important for them and what we should make sure that we're highlighting to you when we're talking about this project. And so here are some of the things that they said, and then we've got some audio clips of them talking about their involvement. So firstly, they wanted everyone to know that everyone always says it takes a village to raise a child. I've had to build my own village on my own. It shouldn't be this hard. The pandemic has been a time when a lot of help has been provided for people without any shame. This is how it should be. I want to normalise asking for help and support, not creating stigma and fear about it. I want professionals to see care experienced parents as all they are, not just their past experiences. I think it's so important for all professionals, including police and health services, to be thinking this way and be better informed. So on this slide then, I've got some audio clips from parents. So two parents that have really worked with us throughout the whole development of this charter, and without whom we certainly wouldn't have been able to do it this way, and it would not have been anywhere near what it is now. So I've got some clips. So the first one is of them introducing themselves.
Hi, my name is Jen. I got involved with the charter after being involved with Dr Louise Roberts' research and her book, and I just found that it was a nice end after seeing the outcomes of the research to make the positive steps that were needed, that were identified, so that better outcomes for parents and children in the future.
Hi, I'm Sid. I'm mum of two. I got involved with the charter through the peer support cafe that we took part in.
So that's an introduction from the parents, and they're both from the Voices from Care peer support cafe. So next, we asked them kind of what role did they play in the development of the charter?
Well, we did a couple of different sessions. I did some work with Louise. I had some conversations with the CEO of Voices from Care, Debbie. Took on my own personal experiences and other experiences that I've heard other young people talk about, and just things that I noticed like over time that needed to be changed from professionals and people working in the field.
But with the language, I just wanted everybody to be able to understand it, because not everybody is a professional, so they're not going to understand big, long words. I mean, I get up in the morning and don't understand half the words that I know from 6 years ago. So it's just everyone needs to be able to understand it to be able to make a difference. And if you don't understand the language, then you're just going to be like, yeah, I have no clue. And you're going to pretend to listen and not really listen.
There's such a wide variety in people's experience and how they were treated and responded to and what their needs were. And I suppose the challenge of the charter is trying to capture, is trying to create something that captures all of that, you know, thinking through what would be helpful, what do we need for parents who need, you know, little support or no support, all the way through to parents who are likely to need a lot of support for a long time. Do either of you want to say anything about how we tried to develop a charter that covers all of those different scenarios and situations?
It was bloody hard work.
It was.
You had to like try and find the points, but present them as nicely as you could, without being biased.
Absolutely.
Which is extremely difficult to do when not all of us have good experiences. I mean, some of us have good and bad, some of us have just good, and some of us just have bad. So it's like you got to get it down the middle without trying to offend anyone.
I think, as I've discussed in like the peer group, peer research group, peer support group, is like the term like takes a village to raise a child. Everyone's village is different, and everyone's background is different. Everyone's upbringing is different. But also, one of the things that we haven't mentioned, not all people go into care at the same time. Some people go and spend their life in care. Some people are teenagers when they go into care, and have had a range of experiences then before they go into care. Everybody is an individual, and I think that's why as well the charter needed to look at it in different steps, because it's not all one meets all, and not a factory setting of this is how you go into the care system, this is how you become a parent, this is how you parent. Because also everybody parents differently. There's no guidebook on how to be a parent. There's no guidebook on how to handle situations.
Some wise words there. So next we asked, why did they get involved?
Personally, I think because it shouldn't be down to lack of, if a judge is having a good day, or the judge likes you, that you get to be a parent, or that if the professional works with somebody and gels with somebody, that you get to be a parent and get supported. I myself I'm a parent of 5 children. I only actually actively parent 2 children, and my 2 older children I have been adopted because I was in care and wasn't given a chance. And even though my corporate parents should have been corporate grandparents, I was left homeless. So the only option I had at the time was for my child to be adopted. And with my 5-year-old, I was again taken through the court proceedings, and during the court proceedings I was told, we'll see you back here soon. I've now actively parented that child for nearly 6 years, and this is where I think the changes need to be, because if I'd been given the support, I could have been a parent a long time ago. And I see a lot of young people not given the right support, because you don't always have to have a family. You build your own community, and we all have our own communities. The saying, it takes a village. We all use our different support networks of villages, and we can't all do things straight away. We all need support, and that's why I think this is important, and to stop more children going into the system.
Great. What about you, Sid? Is there anything key about the section in the charter about when you are pregnant that's really important to highlight?
With me, it was a little bit different, because even though I was pregnant and still homeless, the council did get on my case, and they did do it pretty quickly, and that was because I was a care leaver. So I'm not sure if it's just because of the time difference, and that somebody had been able to kick people's butts into gears, because we're only talking 3 years ago. So a lot of change from when Jen had her first to when I had my first. So that's a good sign, I suppose, but it's still not enough, which is what the charter is about.
This is why I love the Voices parenting virtual group, because all the ladies, we share little tips on this, or whether it's how to get staying out of a uniform, or my child won't sleep, there's no professionals around, what do I do? And I think that's why the group is so important, that it's set up. Even though there are staff that can see the messages, it's basically a bunch of at the moment it's only females. It is open to males, but that are just such a lovely bunch, supporting each other, all of various different ages, all various different experiences. Because unfortunately, for a lot of mums, they are restrained to staff and office times if they need support off a social worker, or an aftercare worker, or health visitor. Then a lot of these are office time, so if you've only got that support, where are these young people going to get support? So that's why the Voices from Care virtual group is very important. For me, it's also been a great support through the global pandemic that's been happening. the group ran through all that, and it was my source of seeing people, because I was self-isolating at home alone and I wasn't seeing anyone. And just being able to come on that group, have a little bit of human interaction, I think that helped keep me going. So a lot of these things that happen, so as no, like the charter is really, really important. It's really important that all the areas are covered so that all the work and funding and everything can be put out there.
Well, during the pandemic, I went through pregnancy and due bills were there like all the time because I had a couple of scares as well. And obviously everyone's kids are different ages. So my eldest is going through things that Jen's kids have already gone through. And I'm like, what do I do? Help me, save me. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And then obviously we've not been able to see anybody. Zoom group was like the only thing that we could look forward to.
And then just finally, we asked the group what impact you hope it will have.
Jen, when you've been at the forefront of the development of this charter, when you read through the charter now, do you think that it, had that been in place when you first became a parent, do you think that would have made a difference to what happened with your family?
Most definitely. I think that I would have had more support. There would have been less stigma, less pressure. There would have been a better system in place for professionals to impact work, support, helping me to get the basics. Because when I say basics, we're not just talking baby basics. I was literally homeless and I was stuck in the hospital because they had nowhere to discharge me to. I was still subject to a care order myself and was homeless. So if you think about that for a moment, subject to a care order and homeless, that's just total failings on a local authority, on a government, on a system that's there to protect people. So if the system was there, then they would have been accountable with the charter to accountable for their actions. Even though on paper then I've only got my GCSEs as a qualification, which I done many years ago, my lived experiences and changes I've made are what keep me going. You know, when I say to people, oh, I've done this today, one of the biggest things, when I see that something I've gone through and I've worked on, and then I see the changes happening for young people, it's a brilliant feeling. And it's brilliant to think that these changes are happening because I spent 10 minutes on a call to Cascade, or have an email through voices. I feel lucky that I've been able to continue with this work. I think all professionals have worked amazing through a global pandemic, and I would like it to be noted somewhere that this charter was made with young people during a global pandemic where the world was falling apart, but people were still out there on the front line fighting for rights and not giving up for not only this generation but generations to come.
What I want to see is I want to see professionals sitting down and listening to young mums, young people just leaving care, and I want them to really listen to them about what they need and to understand that just because we're young and we have children or have children on the way, that we shouldn't be treated differently. Yes, we do need the extra support, but we don't need to be judged for it. That's what I want to see happen. I want to see social workers and young people, young mums, young dads, young anything, to work together instead of trying to work against each other.
I'm just looking forward to seeing many more local authorities signing up. I'm looking forward to the positive changes, not just for the generation to come, but the generation after that. I think the only thing that will count this is more positive, more families together, more support. And again, I would just like to remind everyone that this charter was done during the middle of a global pandemic, and I would like to thank all the staff involved for giving us this opportunity, and for all the young people that got involved, this opportunity to do this when the world was a little bit crazy.
Yeah, I'm just looking forward to hopefully everybody being able to work together and coexist without fear. So the more boroughs that we can get to join in, the better.
And on that note then, that's the end of our presentation. So we'd be open to any feedback and questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. And Louise, I don't know if there's any questions or comments already.
Yeah, so there are some lovely comments in the chat, and there was one question from Andy. Can you speak a little to the Charter commitment to supporting the inclusion and well-being of fathers and their input to the research? I think that's a really good question. I did struggle in terms of getting fathers involved in the research, and I think that has been seen in other pieces of research as well. When I went to local authorities as well, and tried to provide that snapshot that I talked about of current payments, we identified far fewer fathers than we did mothers. So there is issues about visibility. The fathers that I did speak to in the research, they talked about, you know, a lack of involvement, a lack of inclusion in sort of meetings, you know, including, you know, formal meetings where there were concerns about parenting. They talked about a lack of support and encouragement in terms of, you know, like just encouragement to be involved in their children's lives. They talked about a lack of support services. We have seen some positive developments more recently in terms of the support that's available for care experienced mothers, but in terms of fathers, you know, we are still in need of you know, specialist services, or to think about the support needs of fathers. A lack of role models as well came up in the research. Rachael mentioned the podcast that we did as part of our resources, and Jackie Murphy from TGP Cymru highlights very powerfully the lack of inclusion for fathers, the lack of support, and sees that as a key next step in terms of development. So, you know, when we are talking about the Charter and thinking, you know, what could that look like for fathers, we are pretty much encouraging just inclusion, just support for fathers. You know, things like in the research, it came up that young people or young fathers were sometimes inhibited from seeing their children because they didn't have the funds, you know, to visit them, or, you know, and as I said, they weren't invited to certain meetings. It wasn't part of that sort of consideration. So it is very much about involving fathers, thinking about fathers, promoting that relationship with their children. Okay, are there any other questions in there? Have you had a look, Rich?
Yeah, so there's one that's just come through now. So thank you for a great presentation on this really important work. Excellent to have the Charter as a focus going forward to achieve change. Can you say a bit about how the Charter is being received by local authorities in Wales?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I'd like to say that, you know, we have highlighted a range of concerns in this presentation, but, you know, from the time that I started doing this work, I've been really repeatedly encouraged by people's responses to it, and that includes statutory professionals. You know, I'm yet to meet somebody that has said, oh, I don't know why you're researching that, I don't know why you're working on that. You know, everybody straight away has recognised the need for policy and practice change. When we've shared, when we were developing the Charter, and we shared our work as it was ongoing with statutory professionals, we were pleased with, you know, the responses. I was sort of bracing myself, if I'm honest. You know, we have been in a pandemic. You know, we know the challenges to social care. We know, you know, the demands that are on social workers, but we were really encouraged because the feedback that we had was that this Charter almost could provide a framework for working with young people, making sure that the support is in place, and in those worst cases where, for whatever reason, you know, children are unable to remain with their parents, statutory professionals talked about the Charter as sort of providing that sort of reassurance that everything that could have been done was done, and that support for parents would be ongoing. I would really, you know, because I know we've shown the film clip here, but that is, you know, just to stress, that is a real summary of the charter. You know, the charter, the full version of the charter breaks down, you know, a series of commitments about what we should be doing before a young person becomes a parent, all the way through to worst case scenarios where if a child is removed from a parent, and what support should be available to them as they continue.
And it includes lots of examples of what some of that could look like as well, which I think was really important to the parents when we were putting it together, because otherwise kind of really broad terms seemed quite meaningless to them. They really wanted examples of what that support could look like, so we've tried to incorporate that as much as possible. So we would urge you to have a look at the full version if you can. So then there's another question here with, did you engage with systems of health involved in this support to parents leaving or in care, the role of midwifery in referral systems and health visitors?
Yes, we did have some participation in the research for those, and in terms of our next steps, you know, we intend to sort of promote the charter and sort of target particular groups of professionals, including midwives and health visitors.
And if anybody has any wider suggestions about that, about who we should speak to, or any links or contacts that you think you'd like to share with us, we would really appreciate that. So please do get in touch.
I saw in the chat as well, Donna had mentioned wanting to tell us about work in England about, you know, in efforts to support care experienced parents. Donna, I would love to know more about that, and that goes for everybody else in attending the webinar today. If you do have examples of good practice, we are really keen to feature those on the website and share those. So we have seen some positive developments in terms of, you know, peer groups for parents, which seem to be really positive. The development of Project Unity from NIAS Cymru, which has been expanded across Wales, but also some initiatives from within local authorities as well. So there's one local authority in Wales who make sure that flying start services are available to all care experienced parents, regardless of whether they're within the boundaries or not. So anything like that, we would really like to hear about, and so that we can share them with others.
Andy's just got back to us to say thanks for answering this question, and he thinks the charter is brilliant and really important. He's an advocate and taking it to his local authority, and could he put us in touch with them directly? Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
that is the focus of our continued work in this area. You know, we are now in a position where we are asking local authorities to sign up. I'm hoping to get a slot with the All Wales Heads of Children's Services meeting shortly, you know, and encouraging local authorities in Wales, which is where the research was originally based. You know, we are keen to get All Wales sign up, and as Rachael mentioned earlier, we've been thrilled to partner with Terry Galloway and his local leaving care offer website. Terry's been fantastic in securing the first sign up in England. When we started this project, we didn't really envisage that it would go beyond Wales, so we were thrilled that Harrow Council are the first authority to sign up, and you know, as far as we're aware, there are you know, shortly will be further authorities announced as well for signing up. So yeah, that is our next goal.
So we've just shared, so Sean has as well, and I've just shared our email addresses, so please do get in touch. We'd really appreciate any contacts or any groups or people you think it would be for us to talk to.
Lovely. Donna, I've just seen your message. Yes, we will definitely meet up and discuss this further. Thank you.
There doesn't seem to be any more questions, and we're about at time. So I don't know if there was anything you wanted to wrap up with, Louise.
No, I think we've covered it. Thank you for you know, your positive comments. It's really encouraging. And you know, as I said, please feel free to get in touch with Rachael or myself in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.